You're listening to the International Moving Podcast, your guide to moving to another country, brought to you by SDC International Shipping, LA's finest. An international move is exciting. It's a time to start over, establish a new business maybe, reestablish family ties, or retire where your budget will do more for you. Please enjoy today's episode, and if you have any questions about your international move, give us a call at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962. All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Jim for SDC International Shipping. As always, great to be here with you today. Today we're going to talk about an important topic. We're going to talk about packing and preparing for a big move. And of course, you're listening to the International Moving Podcast. This is where we talk about all things related to making an international move, whether it's to a neighboring country like you're leaving the United States, heading to Canada, or maybe even south to Mexico or Panama, or maybe you're moving to the other side of the world, the United States to Australia, or even doing the reverse, coming from Europe to the United States. What we do here on this podcast is talk about all of the various elements that go into an international move. But not only that, we talk about the particulars of the move. We talk about what's involved in processes like going through customs. We talk about costs of living in a variety of different places. Because when you get right down to it, not everyone is making a move or considering making a move for the same reason. For example, some people are relocating for a job, while others are just wanting to be closer to family, or still others are just seeking a new experience, maybe starting over in a new country. But regardless of the reason, everything comes back to certain constants that are going to be present in the process, regardless of the reason why you're making the move. Packing happens to be one of them. It's one of the more stressful parts of the process. But it's not something that you have to overly worry about, because if you do have a plan in place, it can be more straightforward and there can be a lot less stress involved. Now, I know what it's like because I've been through this process myself, not in moving to another country, but from moving from one part of the United States, the Northeast, to the Southeast. And that was the longest move that I've ever personally made, 1,200 miles away. But I still remember the stress that went with packing, because in the beginning you're thinking about what should you take, what should you sell, what should you give away. Sometimes you have an emotional connection to certain things. But of course, when we're talking about moving, whether we're talking about space in a container or space on a truck or both, you're going to have that situation come up from time to time where you have to ask yourself, is it worth paying extra to move certain items, or does it just make sense to part ways with them? Maybe you've had some great memories, you give it to somebody in your family or whatever it happens to be. And so, there's a lot that goes into the planning process, but planning is a big part of it, because if you know what you're doing, or you work with people that know what they're doing, which is what I suggest, it makes the entire process a lot easier. Now, during my interstate move, I was fortunate enough to have friends on both sides of the move who understood the process and were there to help. And at the time, I did a lot of the heavy lifting. I hate to say it, I don't think I'd want to do that again, but especially if you're not used to lifting heavy things. And when it came to wrapping, I was trying to be a little bit frugal at the time, but I inadvertently mispacked or mispackaged certain things, because when it comes to delivering items from point A to point B, regardless of the method that's used, there's going to be a certain amount of shifting and movements and shaking that happens. And that's where you want to make sure that whatever you have packed, especially if it's fragile or easily breakable, that it's not going to move. And so you're always better off putting too much, maybe packing paper or packing peanuts or the foam wrap, whatever you're going to use. It would always be better to use too much of that than not enough, because again, the movement is where the breakage happens. And we even got to the point, I'll talk about that probably in a few minutes, where we had a box within a box. It was packed really tightly within one box, and then we put that in another box to even lessen the movement, put a bunch of peanuts around that. But of course, with the international move, you're not going to be wrapping you yourself the big items. That's what you have an international moving company for. You have professional packers that do that. But it also makes sense with certain items to have those professionally packed as well. Especially, again, we're talking about maybe it's a smaller item, but maybe it's an antique, and you really want to make sure that's properly wrapped and do everything in your power to make sure it gets from point A to point B without breaking. And that's where other things come into play, like taking out extra insurance on certain items because you don't want to lose them. But we all know that preparing for an international move is a little bit different than making a local move. So in the big picture, you have customs regulations, you have shipping timelines, you have to figure out what to pack versus what you're going to leave behind. So we'll look at this today. I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know or be aware of to pack and prepare for your international move. We'll talk about how to organize your belongings, to tips on navigating customs. And again, if you're working with a company like SDC International Shipping, we're here to help you every step of the way. At SDC, we specialize in making the international move seamless, from everything from packing services, special crating, creation, and packing, to dealing with customs and delivering your belongings safely to your new home. There's a team in place to cover all of that. So whether you're shipping household goods plus vehicles plus valuable items, the expertise is present to get the job done. So let's jump into this topic. Let's look at the basics. The basics of packing for an international move. One of the best things you can do is to start early, because an international move requires more planning than a local move. So you want to give yourself plenty of time to pack up your home. You don't want to be against the clock and rushing through the process if you don't have to. So the first step is to make a packing checklist. And this will help you stay organized and ensure that you're not forgetting anything important. So you can start by walking through your home. Maybe you take inventory of what you're going to bring. Maybe you put a question mark next to certain things. Like maybe you have too many books. Maybe you take 50% of them if you love books. I'm not saying that it has to be that way. I'm just saying that if you're going to make it easier on yourself, then sometimes making a sacrifice here and there is worth it. Keep in mind, of course, that the more you ship, the more expensive it's going to be, or the more expensive it can get. So you might want to consider maybe downsizing or leaving some non-essential items behind. I know after several moves, after making the big move myself and then making several moves over the years, when it came to things like books, I love reading books. There's nothing like having a book and sitting down and reading it. I used books for business purposes for years to learn about new topics. And then what happened is gradually I began to realize that being that I was moving, maybe not often, but semi-regularly, maybe every 3 to 4 or 5 years or so, then packing the books became a chore. And so I figured out how to get different types of boxes just for books. And even then, those boxes, of course, are the heaviest, so you don't want to overpack them. And then you realize that you're not even looking at these books hardly ever anymore. Sure, they look nice if you have a nice built-in bookshelf especially. But then I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it make more sense to either sell these books or give them away and maybe buy the Kindle version of them? So if I ever want to go back and look at them, then maybe I could have hundreds of books on a device instead of hundreds of books on a shelf, guessing that maybe one day I'll be interested enough to read them again. So there comes a point where you're just sort of hoarding things, thinking that you may use them. And when it comes time to get rid of them, you may look at something that you haven't used in 5 years because you forgot it was even there. But suddenly when you see it again, the idea of giving it away is difficult because that thought process comes back. Well, what if I want to use it again? Again, I've been there myself. I have old game systems that I haven't plugged in 15 years or so. I still haven't gotten rid of them. Now, it's not like I have dozens and dozens of game systems, but I keep them to the side. Some of them have a little bit of sentimental value to them. I have a the original Nintendo game system that my dad bought for me years ago, and there's a sentimental connection there because he bought it for me. But anyway, you understand what I'm talking about. Sooner or later, you got to bite the bullet. And I had to tell you from experience, letting go is the hardest thing, but a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, you won't even be thinking about it anymore. So just letting you know, you can do it if you really want to. But so you want to make sure that you consider seriously downsizing, getting rid of certain things, leaving non-essential items behind. And then the next step, of course, is you're actually going to go through the process of gathering your packing materials. And so this would include sturdy boxes, bubble wrap, packing paper, tapes, all of that. And then for delicate or high value items, consider investing in maybe some custom crates or have it professionally packed, because professional packing materials are not like the cheap standard packing materials you might buy in a Walmart. And so that's something SDC International Shipping can help you with. Anything that you're concerned about maybe packing improperly, you can have SDC International Shipping handle that. So maybe you just want to pack maybe 30% of your items, and then you pay a company like SDC to help you with the rest of it. So in other words, it's not either or. There's a lot of wiggle room in there that you can work with and that they'll work with you on. Because if you're dealing with a professional packer, again, it just takes a weight off of your shoulder knowing that the chances of it getting there in one piece are really, really high. Whereas if you're learning on the job, well, again, talking from personal experience, sometimes things go wrong. So you want to use materials specifically designed for packing for international shipments to ensure that your belongings arrive safely at their destination. Another important part of packing is deciding on what to pack in your luggage versus what to ship. So things like essential clothing, toiletries, maybe important documents, those things should go with you. Of course, bulkier items, furniture, appliances, those things can be packed and shipped ahead of time. A clear tip here is to label everything so that you can identify it easily. Maybe write in big letters or have big labels, and so that you know when you arrive in the new country what needs to go in what room. Usually rooms are loaded in a special way. I know that if you're just even moving within, let's say, a town, if you're moving your whole household, usually the rooms are loaded one room at a time. So the kitchen might be loaded, and sometimes they're loaded in such a way that when people understand what the destination is, they're unloaded in the right order. In other words, the items that go to the back of the house are the ones that are loaded last on the shipment, because then they're the ones that can come out first. So in other words, if you're in have a container type of shipping, have a big container, lots of items, when people understand that, that makes everything easier. Otherwise, if everything goes in the front room when you first come in, then you've got to move past boxes in order to get further back into the house. Maybe that makes sense. So if you imagine bedrooms being at the end of the house, maybe the bedrooms would be loaded last, and so that way they're unloaded first at the destination. They go all the way to the back of the house, and then by the time the last items come, they are the things that belong towards the front of the house. Those are just some things that I noticed what professional movers have been doing over the years to make everything easier. They really do have it down to a science, but today I'm just talking about mainly getting everything packed, getting rid of things, getting your materials, getting some kind of a plan in order so that it's just easier for you. And of course, things like maybe birth certificates, insurance papers, other things like that, maybe you keep them in a bag. I know certain people have moved from time to time using those big Ziploc freezer bags that has the slider thing. That way, if anything spills, they're protected, but you have easy access to them. Maybe keep that in a folder or something on you, in a backpack or wherever. Again, so you have easy access to it. Think about if you've been on a plane. Of course, most people have. There are certain things that you want access to that aren't packed away in storage. So it's no different when you're moving internationally. But labeling everything clearly really is a tremendous help. You don't have to open a box and look in it just to see what's in there and then say, okay, everything goes from this box into that room. It's going to waste a lot of time. So if all the boxes with the kitchenware are labeled in such a way that all you have to do is look and you see, kitchen on the box, again, everything's easier when you arrive in the new country and you need to unpack. Now, some people are a little older. Some people have the extra money, and it's not that they can't do it, but they don't want to do it. They leave all the packing, all of it, to the company of choice. And they leave all the unpacking to the company of choice. In other words, you can pay for, if you want, white glove service and have everything done from A to Z, and that way that you can focus on the other things that are important. Maybe getting started in your new job, or if you're running a business, or you're in school. I mean, there's different situations, or you're retired and you're not in a position to be lifting heavy things or to be spending or investing the time in doing a lot of packing and unpacking, just certain things that maybe you're going to keep on your own person. So fragile items, when we look at a fragile item like glassware, dishes, artwork, for these you're going to want to use plenty of bubble wrap and padding. Matter of fact, you can probably go online and find examples of specific things being properly packed. Like I just mentioned, dishes and glassware. You can probably go onto YouTube or some other video channels and just look up how to properly wrap glassware so it doesn't break on a long journey or something like that. How to properly wrap dishes or artwork. I've had people in my family who owned art galleries before, and I actually watched them go through the process of crating and wrapping artwork. People pay quite a bit of money for original artwork, not to mention all of the other types of artwork, sculptures, and things like that. And these different pieces of art get transported over long distances. And sometimes people will buy a piece of artwork on one coast and have it packaged and crated for delivery in Europe or in Asia or in Australia. And so there are systems in place to do that and to do it properly. And of course, insurance on those items because they're very expensive. But when it comes to things like wrapping and padding, again, you don't want to be a tightwad when it comes to wrapping a fragile item. Sometimes double boxing, as I mentioned before, can be done. Some items, very fragile, are placed in a smaller box and they're wrapped inside there and then placed into a larger box with even more padding. That can add an extra layer of protection. For electronics like computers and TVs, it's important, very important actually, to pack them securely to prevent, again, damage during transit. If you still have the original packing, that's a great idea. I was surprised to learn how many people actually keep their original packing. I usually keep it for 30 days and then I get rid of it because if it has to be returned to the store, then they use that packaging to return it to the manufacturer. But otherwise, you just want to use a sturdy box. Again, plenty of padding. Think about how well some computer items are packaged when you first unpack them, or some of the stuff that you get from Amazon. Don't forget, if you have batteries in any of these devices, you want to remove those and you want to wrap cords separately to avoid tangling. And so, again, you can go online and watch ways that smaller items are packed and removed. And then these little plastic Ziploc freezer bags, again, are great for certain things. Maybe you can put your mouse in there with the battery separate or wrap keyboards separately. And just take your time. Make sure you do it properly. Again, online you can find plenty of examples of what to do and probably what not to do. Now, when it comes to furniture, many times, like for example, SDC will be taking care of that, probably 99 out of 100 times. So it's good. What they'll do is disassemble what can be disassembled to save space and then reassemble on the other side. It's part of the international move. And then the screws, the bolts, the assembly instructions are in clearly labeled bags so that they can be reassembled in the new home. Excuse me. At SDC International Shipping, we offer custom crating for larger furniture, for artwork, to ensure that everything that needs to be safely packed and transported is done so properly. Now, clothing is another item. Clothing can take up a lot of space, so maybe instead of, if you're going to do the packing of your clothing, Instead of folding everything into boxes, consider using vacuum sealed bags. If you've never seen those before, they're available in different stores, they're available online. And what happens is everything goes into this bag, and the bag is compressed when it's closed. Usually it connects to a vacuum that sucks out the air. And it's kind of like a food saver. If you've ever seen a food saver, where you can take your leftovers and they go into this plastic pouch, and the food saver sucks the air out and seals the end, and then you put it in the freezer, and people have eaten food a year later that tastes just as it did the day it was sealed, because all of the air has been removed from the food. So same concept. Your clothing is in a bag that gets compressed, saving space and protecting your clothing from moisture during the journey. So no matter what you're packing, SDC International Shipping has the professional packing services available, which is great because that removes all the guesswork out of it. When you have an expert packer using industry-approved materials to ensure that your items are packed securely for the international shipment, that's a lot off your shoulders. We did mention important documents and valuables. Those items, of course, are always going to require extra care and attention because a lot of them are kind of irreplaceable in a lot of ways. I mean, documents like passports, visas, birth certificates, medical records. A lot of people will keep those with them in their carry-on luggage because they don't want to risk these critical items getting lost in transit. If you've ever flown before, the chances are either you, yourself, or somebody you know has lost something in transit. Very, very, very rarely have I ever heard of anything being lost in transit, meaning totally lost in an international move. Things can get misplaced, and again, that's why if you have professionals labeling everything, then the chances of this happening are greatly diminished. But, human beings are human beings. Sometimes things go wrong. So oftentimes things get misplaced, again, with airlines, and that's why this is just something to be aware of. Make digital copies, if you can, of all your important documents. Store them online or on a secure USB server or both. And that way, if anything gets misplaced, you'll still have access to the information. And then for valuables like jewelry, family heirlooms, personal mementos, you want to be extra cautious. I know many expats prefer to carry these items with them rather than ship them, especially for the smaller items. And if you do decide to ship them, make sure that you have a detailed inventory and consider getting additional insurance to cover any potential loss or damage. SDC offers comprehensive moving insurance options. So you can buy what you need. You don't have to buy more. You don't have to waste money on buying the most expensive insurance plan. You just decide what you want to insure, and then you go ahead and get the coverage just for that if you want. And that will give you that additional peace of mind that your most valuable items are protected. Customs regulations. Now, we can't talk about international moving without mentioning customs regulations because navigating customs, if you do it yourself or try and do it yourself, is probably one of the most complicated aspects of moving to another country. But with a little preparation, it doesn't have to be a hassle. Every country has its own set of rules regarding what you can and cannot import. So it's important to familiarize yourself with these regulations before you pack. So, for example, certain countries restrict the import of alcohol, plants, or even specific electronics. So SDC International Shipping offers custom clearance services so that the team can help ensure that all your paperwork is handled to make sure that you avoid any delays or any unexpected fees. And it's also important to declare high value items. So if you're shipping, let's say, electronics that are very expensive, artwork, again, we mentioned that, or other valuables, make sure to declare them properly to avoid any issues at customs. So at SDC, they make the process much easier by helping you create a detailed packing list and then preparing all of the necessary customs forms to go with the packing list. Everything then is done by the book, and your shipment will go very smoothly. So, just wrapping this up, packing and preparing for an international move, when you're thinking about it, it can seem like a huge task, maybe even overwhelming. But with the right approach, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. From creating your initial packing list to organizing your documents and valuables, every step that you take, step by step, that's why I say if you start ahead of time, every step is one less step you're going to have to take as you get closer to your big day, to the day of the move, and another step closer to a successful, stress-free relocation. So remember, if you feel like you're in over your head, and hey, there are things that I paid for, services that I paid for, looking back, having nothing to do with moving, but maybe having more of a legal aspect to them, where I could have gotten the forms online, I could have done everything myself, I could have saved a few $100s here and a few $100s there. But when I was really thinking about it, there were a few little items that I was uneasy about, and then I got conflicting information about how to do certain things. I just said, you know what, I'm just going to go and pay an attorney to do it and just be done with it. And so sometimes you have to do that with certain things. There are certain things that, yes, you can save some money by doing it yourself, but other things just aren't worth it. And that's going to be different for everyone. So don't feel bad if you feel like, oh, I can handle this, and then as you get into it, you realize that maybe you bit off a little bit more than you can chew. So SDC International Shipping is here to help. Whether you need partial or complete total packing services, guidance on customs and regulations, or just a reliable partner to handle all the logistics that go with this, SDC has the experience to make your international move as smooth as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for joining me today for another International Moving Podcast episode. Be sure to subscribe and share the link with some friends if you have other friends out there that are interested in this topic of international moves, relocation, what it's like to move to another country. Check out our website also. Just about every day we're adding new information that can help you understand specific moves to specific locations, plus everything that goes into different aspects of the move. You can learn about the different insurance options, the packing process, all of that. It's all available at sdcinternationalshipping.com. You can chat with one of our live relocation specialists there. Or if you just want to grab your cell phone and call us, we're at 877-339-0267. That's 877-339-0267. This is Jim. Thanks for sharing this time with me today, and I will see you next week in my next episode.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening. Whether you're relocating within the country or moving to the other side of the world, we're here to help from start to finish. Connect with us today at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962.